Okay, it's official. It's 11 o'clock. So as we try to do each one of these webinars that we hold, we try to start it on time. So good morning in anywhere that's not Central Time that's behind us. And if you're on the East Coast, an early welcome to your afternoon. Today, we're going to be talking about expanding your database with LinkedIn prospecting, expanding your database. So I'm going to cover what really my approach, US Farm Data's approach to how we use a tool like LinkedIn. So you can think of it as, how does a database company use a third-party database? So we'll be running through this. Oop, let me get my slides advancing here. Okay, so today's agenda, what we're going to talk about, well, the way I've got this organized is, my name is Greg Chambers, by the way, with US Farm Data, and I'm going to cover three broad concepts. And the reason we do this is just to center ourselves, make sure we're on the same page, so that you know where I'm coming from and can gauge the rest of the information through that lens. Then we'll also go into 6 tactics, and those I consider to be things that you can do right now. So tactics, you should be able to employ them literally as you get off, or even as you're sitting on the call. And then if you have questions, the way we're going to do this, the way that Q&As have been running is that it doesn't seem like anybody has any questions. So if you have any questions, use the chat box, and you can ask them anywhere along the way. So if you have questions up front, or topics, or information that you want me to cover, go ahead and throw it into the webinar chat. There's no bad questions. I'll answer it if I can. If I can't, we will look it up and get back to you when we send the recording out at the time. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump in. It sounds like you can hear me. You can hear me, and it looks like Trang's already prompting for questions in the chat box, or the Q&A. There's also an open Q&A if you want to ask your questions that way. All right, let's talk about these 3 broad concepts. The 3 broad concepts that I'm going to cover today actually relate to a lot of, they relate to LinkedIn specifically. I'll talk about that, but they also relate to a lot of these tools. And when people come to us and say, hey, you know what, you should be using this, you should be doing this, how is it that we want to approach this? This is how we approach it internally. The first one I'm going to call Know Thyself. The second one is Wherever They Are, Be There. And the third one is What Will Tomorrow Bring? So let's jump into Know Thyself. The first one, the reason we have this out there is there's so much advice out there that what you need to be able to do is to separate it and to know, it's really important to know your process better than they know their process, if that makes sense. I'll go a little bit more into that here. When the reason it's important is because if you have a process and then you try to integrate a new tool, but the new tool, since you're thinking, how is it that I use this? And you ask them, the service provider, how it is that you should use it. Oftentimes what you'll get is their process, like their best practices. This is how most people are using it. And if you're not tying that into yourself, what ends up happening is that it's the clients. It's actually the clients that get kind of confused because it feels like there's a disconnect in how you're communicating with them. So the way we express that is we say, we want to fit the tool to our process versus creating a new process for new tools, or creating a process for the tool. So the way that this is done is quite simply, when it comes to sales and marketing, is drawing out what it is that your process is. And even though that sounds simple, we have some clients that we work with where we do more than just provide lists, where we help them with the rest, other pieces of their marketing. And when we ask for this, it's always surprising how hard it is sometimes to get it out. So it's a good exercise just to go through and make sure that you're writing everything out. As an example, here at US Farm Data, the way that we have built our business is through inbound marketing. So people find us by doing Google searches, coming to the website, and then asking for more information. Then once we've collected that information, we will usually do outbound. So we will outreach, but the people that we outreach to is not a cold audience. It is the people that have already gotten in contact with us, who found us first. So when we look at a tool like LinkedIn, we look at it as, can it help us drive inbound, first of all, because that's our process. Then will it help us when we're doing outbound to these customers? How can we use it there? And so that's where it ends up fitting in most for us, is as we are working with clients, the LinkedIn tool helps us with our marketing there. So that would be an example of where Know Thyself helps when you're looking at these new tools. And that's thanks to the little flicker guy. That's what just popped up there. Who gave us that picture? The second concept I have for you is wherever they are, be there. And what I mean by that is the customers, on the customer's particular decision path, where does a tool like this fit would be a question that we'd ask. So to know that, right, to know where it fits, we actually have to know where it is or how it is that our customers make decisions. The more we know, the reason it's important is because the more we know about the path our customers take when they're making a decision, the more places along that path we can place ourselves, everywhere from early in the decision process, offering them information that would help them with to do their jobs better, all the way to the very end when they're looking for our particular product and service. Can we be there at that time? So the way you do that, as we're putting it together, is we would say, really, you get that from just like coming up with your own sales process is really sitting down and writing out your marketing to sales process, so everybody can agree internally, like, yeah, this is our process that we like to stick to. We go to the customers and we say, how did you make this decision? And really the key question there is before we met. So before you were working with us, how is it that you came to the conclusion, A, that you needed our service, or B, how did you find us? So in our case, it's usually how did you find us? But in your case, if you're out knocking on doors, it may be useful to walk them through. They say, you know what, you were the one that introduced it to me. So when you know about their process, and really you can't know too much about that process, look at a tool. So in this case, like LinkedIn, if you're targeting owner operators, I can make a case for, there's probably, we can find evidence where they would be active in their LinkedIn feed. So they're actually active on LinkedIn. So maybe I want to be in that LinkedIn feed. But landowners, harder to find on something like LinkedIn. And then can we be in front of them on their LinkedIn feed? A little bit tougher. So an example there is we get consultant calls all the time. And a LinkedIn consultant says, I know, Greg, I know there's people making thousands on LinkedIn every day. You need to be there because all your prospects are on there. And when I ask for examples, like where does it fit in? Because this is what I'm thinking of is, I wonder where in my customer's decision process we'd be able to fit in there. The examples that she was able to give me were all consultant to consultant. And those people are really active. I'm right with them on that, I'd say. Yeah, that makes sense, right? It's kind of like finding owner operators. It makes sense. Land owners, I might need a little more convincing before we get there. So make sure wherever they are, you are there. So at this point, we've talked about knowing our sales cycle and knowing our customer's decision process. And the last concept I want to cover is what will tomorrow bring? Because it's not the tool, it's how you use it, right? And my example here, I'm just about to send a kid to college. And when I went off to college, I remember getting one of these. This is probably a newer model than the one that I took to school. But this was, I think I was one of the only people on my floor who had this. And there was a guy on the next floor up who had an early Macintosh. He was the spoiled kid from California. But I'm sending my kid to school with an Apple laptop, right? So there's always new tools is my point, right? New stuff is coming in each day. I'm going through it right now, looking at my old writer and what the kid's going to use for his new writing instrument. So we can't buy, it's important because we can't buy into this fear of missing out. We have to really know our process and our customer's decision process. And then because we're always going to be better off sticking to the process. The different technology, where it all fits in. If I gave Hemingway these two tools, he's always going to write something better than I am. All he needs is paper and pencil. And an example that we have here is there was an insurance company that markets to, we'll call them that suburban ranchettes is what he was calling them, but looking for a database of people who were just outside of the city. They weren't really full giant farms as much as they were smaller acreages, I guess is probably a better way to do it. And in there was, I'm using LinkedIn and it's not working. And our thoughts were, Well, is that really the best way to do it versus something like we can pull lists like that? So can we use mail pieces and then retargeting might be, you know, newer tools that, that fit better in that process. So that is a, for instance of these concepts. So those are the three broad concepts. Know thyself, right? Know your sales process inside and out so you can fit any new tool like LinkedIn in. Wherever they are, be there, your customer's decision process. And whatever tomorrow will bring, tomorrow is always going to bring something new. So by having this down, you can handle these things easier. Now, let's jump into the meat. This is I gave this presentation once before, and this was the part that most people got excited about because it was actually like little tactics. And these tactics are, I'm going to just list them for you and then we'll run through them. Really quick, the 6 tactics are, I always feel like, one step ahead is the second one. Cats/dogs is the third concept or tactic. Step it up is the fourth. Monkey see, monkey do is the fifth. And then 10,000 steps. We'll talk about the 10,000 steps. I don't know if you have a Fitbit, but it seems like I'm hearing a lot about steps lately. But let's jump into, I always feel like, and if you remember, I already dated myself with the typewriter, so I'll go ahead and admit whenever I think of retargeting, I think of Rockwell. I always feel like somebody's watching me. And so website retargeting, this is the easiest way to use LinkedIn right now. What it is you advertise to people who've already been visiting your site. So if you've been solicited by anybody who sells website stuff, they always say 98% of visitors leave without doing anything. And that's true. That's always been true. And for a variety of reasons. But one thing is catching people earlier in the sales cycle. A lot of times they're still looking. So how do you stay in front of them? And LinkedIn, as well as when we did our webinar on Facebook, Twitter, these channels all have this website retargeting piece where you can get more impressions. And the reason is because the reason it's important is because as people are, everybody Googles them, right? Google them. What'd you find out on Google? What do we know about them? They're always going to be looking up. There's a good chance that they're coming to your website to do a little background research, even if it's really early in the sales cycle. So can you get your name in front of them a few more times just to help build with name recognition? I'm not going to promise this, gives you a 10% increase on conversions, but in general, when we have put these together with other programs, retargeting does give us a few more opportunities than we're normally used to. So the way you do it is you go into look up LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. You'll find this. Once you've signed in, you'll need to either create an account for yourself or sign in, but there's under account assets, the insight tag is under website tracking is what we're going to be after there. And then if you're using Tag Manager, Google Tag Manager, it's really easy because in Google Tag Manager is a place to keep all of these tools as they come up. So you just choose the tag type. Facebook, for whatever reason, Google and Facebook, you need to do an HTML one, but this one, all you need to do is go to LinkedIn Insight and you just copy paste the code. And now you'll start building an audience that you can advertise to. So you can build advertisements in LinkedIn that are targeting the people who came to your website. So as an example, you see it, you probably bumped into it every day, especially if you do Amazon or Amazon Prime. Every time you visit a, what do you call it? A product, you see impressions, right? So you'll go to thesaurus.com, and on thesaurus.com, there'll be the ad for the thing that you just looked at. That is a retargeting ad. You've picked up a pixel, and now when they visit the website, they say, hey, show this ad to the people because it all matches. So it doesn't break the bank. That's why we like it. I mean, for a lot of these tools, LinkedIn's a little bit more expensive than the other ones, but you're only talking about, 30 bucks a month, 30, 40 bucks a month. And it helps with consistency, just being there, which can help us build momentum so that we have a greater impact over time. Okay, so that's the first one, the retargeting. This one step ahead. So if the most powerful business you can get, the most powerful business referral you can get is a peer-to-peer referral, right? So that's one business owner, one farmer rancher talking to another, and then saying that they should contact you. I think everyone can agree that's the one thing, that's what we're after, word of mouth. It's perfect. The second one is anytime we can get to borrow somebody's name. So we were just working with agro farms, and we want to, and they said that we should talk to you, Black Sheep Farms. So since referrals, if an unsolicited peer-to-peer referral is best, talking or borrowing a name to be introduced to somebody, that it has to be a close second, but definitely it's second. And the reason is because differentiation is hard, right? There's so many companies that we talk to. Any way that we can narrow the list of choices down so that we can start to make a decision as a consumer, as a buyer, helps. So the way you do it is just dig into LinkedIn profiles. So this is what I do. I'm using this is my brother-in-law, if you can see his name there, Bill Tressler. If you're in Green Bay, Wisconsin, he owns the Hinterland Brewing Company. And yeah, it's good beer, and it's right across the street from Lambeau Field. So you get a lot of Packer vibes if you're a football fan. The way I can use LinkedIn to help him is if I were to just ask Bill, could you introduce me to a few business owners in the area? He would say, yeah, I'd love to. And then he'd think to himself, I wonder who I should introduce him to. So what we can do is we can click on See Connections. That will bring up all filters up on the very top. So over here where it says custom printed apparel, you can see there's a little ad. People will show up. You can click on all filters. And now we're searching the connections of Bill Tressler, which you can see in the lower left. And I could put in CEO, and I can say I want his, connections that are second level. That's to you, right? So I can either look for first connections, which are people who we share together, or second connections, which are people that are probably connected to me through Bill, is the way LinkedIn has that done. And once I get those set in, it gives me a list of names. So if I'm heading up to Green Bay and I say, Bill, could you introduce me to some people? I can pick down, and on the bottom, I just happen to know that her name is Kate. And so I say, can you, would you be able to introduce me to Kate? Or if you can't introduce me, if I call on Kate, is it okay if I use your name? Would be language that I might use for that. That should help him. And are there other people that I should talk to? I might say to Bill. And Bill would say, oh yeah, I will definitely talk to Kate, use my name. And then let me think of some other people. I'm like, okay, well, do you think that, Rick or Richard, I'm not sure what his name is, at the camera corner would be good? What about the CEO at NewCap? NewCap, would she be a good person too? And so what I've done there is I've taken it from Bill, can you introduce me to some people, down to people that I'm prompting him with names so that he can come up with better names, like, oh, don't talk to Rick, that guy's a jerk, but you might want to talk to Joe. He'd be better off for what you're trying to do as you're trying to introduce yourself around town. The way that I always used to describe this is with favorite song. If I went to Bill, he's a big Grateful Dead fan, and I said, hey, Bill, what's your favorite song? What's your favorite Grateful Dead song? Right? Those are two different questions. What's your favorite song? Hard for him to pick. What's your favorite Grateful Dead song? It's probably, in his case, it's probably harder for him to pick. He's such a fan. But it's like, Bill, you saw them at Alpine Valley not too long ago. What was your favorite song that that they played that day? Makes it a little bit easier for his brain to start working and to work for me. So LinkedIn is a perfect tool for that. So that's what we've covered so far, right? Is retargeting. You use it for networking one step ahead. This one, cats/dogs. So as we're doing our searches, one of the things that all database, so you think like, why would a database person do things differently? We are habitually have been using Boolean logic for decades, right? Boolean logic would be this and. So inside of that same search, those same searches, you can see here what I've done is down towards the middle bottom, there's a blue check mark where it's farming. So it's farming industry, and I'm looking for, say, owner managers. This is I just kind of made up this example, but if I wanted people who are listed as owners and managers, that would be one search. Or I could do owners or managers, which would give me one or the other, right? So the first one has to be both. The second one is one or the other. And then the last one, owner, not manager. So maybe somebody who is an owner, but they've never been a manager. I don't know why you'd want that. What it does is it makes for better searches. It gets you deeper into the database. As you start clicking, you have to go through the same results over and over again. This kind of like adding extra search terms in Google. This is a way to, which by the way, you can use Boolean logic inside of Google too. But it just helps you get better searches out of that database. And the example I gave, so this, the reason I hit is cats and dogs is because I found this graphic that describes Boolean logic pretty well, right? And is both terms, or is either term, and not is just one of the terms. It won't pull up both of the terms. So an example that I came up with is if I were looking for sales-friendly CEOs and presidents, how would I do a search like that? Using a title, I would say maybe I want CEOs that have also had the title of sales, right? So sales and CEO. And that would give me maybe somebody who's a little friendlier towards the ideas of CEOs. So that's my little hint. Inside here, this is like bonus. This is like number 7. When I was doing this search, the one thing that popped up is at the top, sometimes look at those URLs, because every once in a while when you look at that giant URL, I had to cut and paste this into another document. But when you're looking at that URL, you can see the operators inside of there too. And it so happens that this URL for this search that I did on the free version didn't have anything, but on the paid version, the Sales Navigator, it did give me results that were linkedin.com/sales/ and there was a whole bunch of other stuff in there. And then it said, and count equals 25. Looking at the results page, guess what happened? There's 25 results that it was showing. So just a quick little, a quick little hack. I changed it to 50, and I get to look at twice as many records as we're scanning through. So it helps me go through the database maybe a little bit faster. So that's for what it's worth in there. But speaking of the paid version, that's what Step It Up is. So let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3. This is the 4th tactic I've got for you. Step it up. Consider investing in the paid version. Usually they give you a free trial for it. But it's worth investigating, mostly for these reasons. It's, I think $80 is what the last, I just looked at it this morning. It was $80 for me. I don't know if they do any of that variable pricing, or maybe they're going to charge you, since you guys are so great, they'll charge you $160 a month. But I think it's just $80 for everybody. And the reason you do it is really it's extended searches. It's there's a few more, as you know, if you filled out your LinkedIn profile, there's a lot of information in there about you, and you can go through and you can really start knocking these things down. You can build up like, these are my target companies, these are lookalike companies, give me information like as they release news releases and it's put into LinkedIn, you get notifications. It's a little much at times, and it's hard to do. It's, you know what it is? It's really easy in this case to change your process to fit the tool. And what we suggest, the first concept that we threw out there is use the tool inside your process. So you need to be able to make it work. So the way you do it is it's just the buy now button in the upper right, but you get unlimited browsing as opposed to being prompted to upgrade. You can save searches, which is something that you can't do. And you get more filters, right? Plus they give you some in-mail. I'm not always, you'd have to show me a few examples of where in-mail works. I get those on a regular basis. And they don't, I don't find them to be all that helpful, but I'm sure there's some people that are using them to great effect. You can send direct emails to people that you're not connected with, because right now you can just do it to the people you're connected with. And you can browse anonymously. So if you want to go spy on somebody, you can peek in there. So those are all reasons to do that. So think of it as a really inexpensive research assistant who can help you, because once you plug all your criteria in, new things will pop up. We just did one with a client for Kubota. So they were trying to track Kubota dealers and reps. We thought, you know what, outside of the list that we have, there's also LinkedIn, and help them set up a search and alerts for that, as they were, it's the same example that I was giving you with the insurance for the targeting those ranchettes. I love the name ranchettes, but I think it's probably acreages. Sounds more like what it really is. Okay, monkey see, monkey do. This is number 5 of 6. So everybody's familiar with search results. And so as we're looking for people, and sometimes you can speed up. So monkey see, monkey do is sometimes you can speed up response times by mirroring language. So they wrote it, it's the words that they use. The more you sound like them, the more you tend to, the more everybody thinks that we're the same, right? It's that common underlying proficiency for all of you language experts out there. That's how it all works. So, and it's important because we always need to match before we can lead, right? We need to meet people where they're at and walk them along. It's and sending an email or link, right? That's going to be our first indicator of how we contact them. So I'm looking at this because I had just given you the example of way back here where I said, oh, InMail doesn't work. Let me tell you the rest of how to do this. So the way you do this is you find them, right? So in this case, the owner operator of Iowana, I don't know if it's Iowana or Iowana Farm is, this is her description. So when you click in, you get to her description. And there's a few words that pop out. And that's what I'm always looking for are, what are the words that are popping out? So in this case, passion, organically, my religion, those are all unique words. I don't see those a lot in these. So as I would be reaching out to her, I may reflect that same language, passion, religion. I have a deep feeling for this. And especially if I were selling something that would help her with her religion of organically growing heirloom vegetables. So that's how it's done. The example I was going to give you was I gave you that I just got an email. So I told you I never respond to these InMails, but I did just respond to one probably towards the end of last week. She just sent me a got it note. But she said, oh, I see you love helping me. I forget what it was, but she's obviously done the same thing. She pulled it right out of my description and helping people. And even though I'm not interested in her services, I still sent a note saying, I'm not interested, but good luck to you. And think about it. Why would I never would have done that if she hadn't made some kind of connection with me on there. So it must work. Is it the thing that's going to separate you from everybody else? Maybe, right? And that's why we do these things. Last tactics. So you've hung in with me for 25 minutes at this point. This is a way that we can use an actual approach list of how we do this. 10,000 steps. If you are familiar with this, everybody was talking about these Fitbits and 10,000 steps. I need to get my steps in. I was just with my parents this weekend, and they both have their Fitbits and they're obsessed. 14,000 steps is how they've just defined it. But I had gone back because I always wonder where these numbers come from. Like, where does 10,000 steps come from? And I found it. And so it turns out that active, inactive, obese, not obese. If you have that grid, a consultant's 2x2 grid popped out, the inactive obese are the ones that have the most problems. But if you're active, 10,000 steps, and obese, you tend to be, it's just like being not obese, right? Okay, so these are the gradations. Like the biggest jump comes from just going from inactive to active. And where is that? It turns out it's 10,000 steps when they went back and measured those people that participated in the studies. So what does that have to do with LinkedIn? Good question. And Greg's answer is we use something similar. We call it the rule of 30. So it isn't 10,000 steps, but it is, we've bought into this, that it takes 10 impressions of a message to get through, somewhere between 9 and 10 impressions of a message before somebody recognizes it. And so if we're trying to get in front of new clients, we think 1 out of 3 of those messages is going to get through. So we need to plan on how do we do 30 touches with a customer. And so the reason it's important is because if you can break something down to a process like this, right? Like figuring out the 10,000 steps, you're going to build momentum because you'll be less distracted by the ups and downs of what goes on in between. So when we're drawing this out for LinkedIn, we went ahead and this is an 11-step approach that we take, or 11 impression approach. So so it's not steps, it's 11 impressions. The first part is this 2-impression intro. To us, an impression is every time they can hear about us, right? So if you're leaving voicemails, if you're hanging up and not leaving voicemails, I would put a plug in for make sure they at least know which company you're calling from, and email. And the reason is because you're trying to get this rule of 30, get the impressions out. The third one, LinkedIn InMail is it's not a horrible way to go to reach out, because now they've seen your company name and maybe your name 3 times. And then the 4th impression, let's drop them a postcard. Generally, especially if you're using the US Farm Data Database, you've got a decent postcard that you can drop out to them that may even drive them back to your website where you can get a few more impressions because you've implemented retargeting as we described in Tactic 1. Then we do another double impression. So the 5th and 6th impressions are voicemail, another email. Impressions 7, 8, 9, and 10, another LinkedIn mail, an email, a call. And so that's the 10, right? We know that probably 1/3 of those got through and we're still a ways away. So hopefully the retargeting is helping us, right? That's why we try to integrate all these tools together to get the most out of them. And then but it was pointed out, Greg, you should tell us about like the one thing, which is magic number 11. So the last piece on this, if we got to get back in front of them 10 more times, right? Or 30, 20 more times to get our 30 impressions to have a shot at doing business with them, we're gonna have to come back later, right? I can't do 30 impressions using this approach right away. So I'm gonna spread this out over time. So how do I make sure that I'm able to come back? And that's, we use this door crack, like leaving the door cracked open. Email, or you can even do this via LinkedIn email. And the language is pretty simple. It works for us. Timing is everything. And I'll be back with new news. So when things change, or if something changes, or if something of interest comes up, I'll be back to you because, right, nobody wants to be bothered to death, right? But at the same time, if you're providing value to them in some way, shape, or form, in general, people will come back in with ideas. So that's it, right? That's the summary that we've popped out so far. The 3 big concepts, which were, how did I label these? Know thyself. That's fitting the tool to your process versus the other way, which is fitting a process, fitting a tool's process into like making it your own process. Wherever they are, be there is knowing your decisions, your buyer's decision process. And then there's always going to be new tools. So it's good to get this kind of a process down because you'll need to, you'll get these quite a bit going forward, new tools. So when it comes to LinkedIn specifically, there's 6 tactics that we would, if we were you, we would put together right now. The first one being set up the retargeting, because anybody visiting your website that's also on LinkedIn deserves to see your smiling face a few more times. Referral prompting, using LinkedIn to get better referrals. Using the paid search, the Boolean search and the hacking. So the Boolean search and the hacking is just getting better searches, but you can really get better searches when you upgrade your account because LinkedIn has hidden some very powerful search tools and techniques because it is worth something, right? In this case, they say what? It's worth $80, $12,960. It's worth at least $1,000 to most people. You can drive more value than that if you use it, right? Which goes back to making sure the tool fits in your process. LinkedIn profiles themselves mirror their language. It's a great way to break through the clutter and to maybe stand out. And then the rule of 30 approach. As with all things, you're going to, it's going to require, it's not a one and done, right? It's a process, not an event, is another favorite saying that we have around here. So find the process and stick to the process and don't rely on it being an event. Oh, I sent them a LinkedIn email and nothing happened. Be better at that. So that's how we use a tool like LinkedIn going forward. So if there are questions, I don't see any questions in the chat box, which is not uncommon, but as I chit chat, you feel free to type something in if there's something else you want me to cover or any of those slides that you want me to review or go into more depth with or give a different example on. But if you have, if you'd rather do that offline, because we have gotten some great calls of people that want to talk about their advice specific to their business or position, contact us and you can reach out to the website, to the email, give a call to the little bald person with the headset on, and by all means, find me and connect with me, Greg Chambers on LinkedIn, Omaha, Nebraska. I think I'm one of the only Greg Chambers in Omaha, Nebraska, and we can share ideas there. Thanks for attending, and if there's anything else, 1, 2, I'll give you to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, have a great Thursday, and hopefully it's nice and cool where you're at because it's hot here. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.